Hey there, welcome to episode 21 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. Today is July 23rd, 2023, as I record this, probably published on the 24th, Monday. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. Today's another solo episode, and so we will dovetail off last week's, which was the axis of innovation. Today, Conjuring Innovation. Essentially, how do we do this? So this is a follow-up, as I said, to the Axis of Innovation episode, which was episode 20. You can listen to that wherever you are listening to this episode, I hope. Should we be building an innovation hub? That is, should we be inviting innovators, whether they're companies or individuals or somewhere in between? Should we invite them to relocate and be a part of a hub of innovation? Or should we lean into our destination city status that we have built up over many decades, and we're quite good at that? Should we create an innovation destination? Can we conjure innovation here in Southern Nevada? That's the question. And how should we do it? So get some water here before we get started. So the axis of innovation, as I covered in the previous episode, my opinions are based on the fact that I have been doing this for a long time. I am, as some of you know, the managing director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, which is aimed squarely at enabling local innovation by local innovators. When I worked at Intel, which was the last time I worked for what I will call a big company, I was in the Maker Innovator group, and I had an opportunity to travel far and wide. I won't say the world, although I did travel internationally, but the world is a bigger place than we realize, really. But I did travel around quite a bit, 47 hackathons worth of seeing and sort of feeling, I guess, what an innovation culture could be like, surrounded by people who want to take a weekend and collaborate with friends or build up a team there. So maybe it's with people they just met. Maybe it's with people they've been working with for years. In some cases, it's people that they actually work with during their day job. I've seen that several times. Sometimes it's students. Sometimes it's well, hopefully we're all students, but sometimes it's college age students, sometimes high school age, and so on. So the mixture of people that were attending these various hackathons, where I participated as a mentor usually and a co-organizer sometimes. Mentor, I say usually, I mean all of them that I attended for the purposes of my Intel travels. So I would attend to help people use their Intel products. So I worked in the lab, helped on some product development, although, I mean, I was not part of the core team because I was traveling. So, but I would definitely work in the lab, do some of the bring up and product and software development, all that. I was on the team, but my main focus was engaging with our users, which you could call makers, I suppose. Makers, innovators, hackers, people that were going to be playing with these maker innovator products. So the products are named after infamous inventors. The first one was Galileo. Some of his stuff didn't get invented, but he certainly was an inventor. The helicopter, for example. But good drawings with both hands. Crazy. So the Galileo was first. The Edison, who was a jerk, but Edison was the main product that I spent most of my time with. The Joule and the Curie. The Curie chip was a embedded x86 with a first attempt at a neural net processor. Nowadays, they're just called like AI processors. But the Curie, named after Marie Curie, of course, appeared on the Arduino 101 board, which was an Arduino Uno form factor, so compatible with Uno shields and whatnot. And it made an appearance in the America's Greatest Makers reality show that Intel produced with Mark Burnett, and which I had the good fortune and interesting experience being a mentor. Since it was our product, I was the mentor for all 24 teams. And then thanks to Mark Burnett selecting, I think, 4 extra teams, I was a mentor for 3 teams more directly. So I could say I was pretty involved in that reality show. So good experience. And the reason I'm saying all this is that I know nothing about being innovative and enabling innovation and being a part of an innovative culture. How could I? And if there's a sarcasm closing tag there, I'll tack that on the end. So does Southern Nevada have this culture of innovation? So when I say culture of innovation, it is, do people show up physically or virtually? I mean, do they actually commit to and execute on innovative things? You're probably thinking, oh, you worked at Intel, you're a big nerd, you must be talking about technology. But let's go the other direction, not to diminish this in any way. Let's say that you're attending a chef school, a culinary academy of some sort. You want to be a chef, or I know nothing of the hierarchy of the culinary world, so I'll just say you want to be a chef. You want to be a trained preparer of food preparation. So you attend the class and say I remember I did read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, and he would tell stories of working at what was the name of the place he attended? The ICA, so International Culinary Academy. Was that what it was? So when he attended, he said it was many years ago, of course. He described it as a simpler time. But the students would work in a real kitchen. So while they were learning the culinary arts, they would eventually do the E-room, I think it was, the Scaffier room, inspired by its namesake. And they would serve customers. They would prepare food for customers. And so it was a couple of stars restaurant, good experience. So one could say that these chefs were taking part in the process of becoming real culinary professionals. And that's great, right? Does that mean you were going to? No. I'm sure some people dropped out or decided they didn't want to do it, or maybe he mocks people a little bit in his book, but some people would go on to maybe patisserie. They would do desserts, or they would focus on baking rather than, I guess, stovetop chefery. But either way, there are people that were in school doing their extra credit or pursuing these practical application projects, working in restaurants, serving real customers, preparing real food, preparing food for their classmates, et cetera, et cetera. Does that mean that everyone doing that was a chef? No. So just because you have a cohort every year, or whatever the term was in that particular institution, of people pursuing training, maybe doing some extra outside work, it does not mean that you have a population exactly that size entering the culinary workforce when they matriculate, right? So the reason I say this is because you can very easily simplify your notion of what your talent pool is by assuming that people that have a desire or interest early are part of that population. It's not a horrible assumption. You will not be fined or imprisoned. However, I don't believe it is always accurate. The reason I bring this up is because after my Axis of Innovation episode last week, I received an email from someone. And in the future, while email is nice and I'm a big fan of email, I would much rather have this conversation that took place in one email in each direction live, or at least recorded in a podcast, so that it's interactive. But I was told that there are hundreds of robotics teams pursuing FIRST Robotics Challenge and VEX robot competitions. And this is an example of how the culture of innovation is alive and well here in the Southern Nevada area. And I would contend that just because you are, and I am not diminishing either of those are fine. I've been to competitions of each. I was a judge for a FIRST Robotics competition event just before I began my ridiculous travel schedule and hackathon participation and so on with Intel. But I did participate as a judge in at the Northwest Academy, in fact, in 2014, here in Southern Nevada. So I have been around that. I actually had a fine time. It was good to see the level of participation, not only on the teams, but between the teams. The thing I've always found in hackathon culture in general is that even if there's a prize to be won, even if there are prizes, teams will still help each other. It's not cutthroat. There's not a sense of like sabotage. Sabotage is not popular. So I was impressed that that was, I had just moved to Nevada not long before this. So I was still discovering, what do we have? What do we have here? And at the time I had actually also attended a couple of hackathons here in Southern Nevada. They were rare. The Take It Backathon, the AT&T sponsored event at the Aria Resort. Those are two separate things. Take It Backathon was a separate sort of a non-commercial hackathon that some people threw downtown. There were reInvent hackathons that AWS, Amazon would put on, basically to show off their Kinesis and other, IoT-oriented products or data capture at the edge, essentially. So every once in a while there'd be hackathons. Clark County sponsored a smart city hackathon that Intel took part in here. Where was it? It was I want to say it was in the Venetian. Could be. But either way, there were, in the 2014-16 timeframe, actual hackathons going on here. So I was encouraged by that. What I found, however, is that maybe that was related in some way to Downtown Project, drawing more entrepreneurial people. At the time, Pololu was more engaged. I haven't really heard about them so much. There was an LV Bots meetup, which I did read about in that email, which I often point to that as an example of something that I hope we can see more of, which is people actually showing up because they want to and participating in things that are not predefined. So that's where my point will be with VEX and FRC. They're fine programs. They're both excellent. They create an environment where people can test the waters and see if this is interesting. They practice collaborating. They practice exploring some things that are probably outside of their normal comfort zone, as far as like building and manipulating things and seeing things fail, which is important, right? Your robot broke. That's a good experience. Make sure it doesn't happen again, or try to make sure it doesn't happen again. So those are fine programs, and I'm not in any way diminishing them. However, there are people that build a robot and then decide, not for me. Also, building a robot from a kit or from a limited spec, it's sort of like NASCAR, right? Like all of them have to use the same parts and all that. Again, not diminishing, but that is one component of an overall innovation, say, program of growth, right? At some point you want to say, well, if I was going to build a robot to do this, here's how I would do it. And that's where you cross over into maybe the upper part of the Bloom taxonomy, or maybe you just go to the next step of, participating in the innovation process. And if you can do that with a team, right? If the team is able to say, okay, we've done the FRC, we've done the VEX. What if we go buy a breadboard, or we go get get a CAD program and start laying out a board ourselves, or however you want to do it. We say, hey, well, let's go get a RISC-V, or maybe an old AVR, or maybe a new M0 or something, and maybe an 8051 or an HC11 if you're old school, very old school. And let's build a robot. And not to toot my own horn, but when I was in college, that's what we did. So I'm giving that as an example. So my lab partner / suite mate / longtime friend Bill Gribble and I designed, in the first semester of our microprocessors class, we designed a computer with a HC11, 68 HC11 Motorola microcontroller and some support circuitry. Actually, no, the first semester we designed a CPU, but it wasn't. Hey, computer, stop talking. And then so that was first semester, we designed a CPU. And then the second semester, we designed a 68 HC11 robot controller and built a robot. So we wire wrapped. Anybody listening here who knows what that is? Yes, I did do that with Bill. We wire wrapped a computer. Bill spent a tremendous amount of time on the hardware part. So he went and made a gyroscope out of an aluminum billet on a lathe with some help from good old Ed Stubblefield, who I have to imagine is machining somewhere in the afterlife and has all 10 fingers. So that guy had everything, all his fingers and faculties and ridiculous amounts of skill. So he was instrumental, but Bill spent a tremendous amount of time on the gyroscope. Yes, a moving, rotating disc. And we had an optical encoder to measure offsets and motor controllers, gearbox. It was a whole thing. And we basically were scrounging for parts and building things. So we had to be innovative, right? We had to be creative. We had to be inventive. And we built this robot, and it was too heavy. When I say robot, by the way, it was a inverted pendulum balancing robot. So it balanced a platform on a cylinder. Cylinder was probably like maybe 24 inches long, diameter probably, I'm going to say like 8 inches, maybe 10. But because we had to scrounge for parts, we had batteries that we wanted it to be untethered. So batteries were too heavy, too much torque, couldn't counter it with the motor, with the gearbox we had to drive in order to put enough torque on the cylinder through a big giant rubber wheel that we got at a hobby shop. We could apply the torque, but not fast enough. So the robot would balance for a few seconds. And then if it became unstable, if you're looking at your root locus, if our poles were on the right side of the plane, which they ultimately ended up being every time, it would eventually just tip over, right? Because it started oscillating and then couldn't keep up with itself, tip over. However, we did build a thing. We built a thing essentially from scraps, using scrap aluminum, our tons of experience with E54 lathes and end mills, and then, like I said, some great help from Ed Stubblefield in his machine room, which was immaculate. That was a crazy insight experience. Anyway, so my point is, we spent all this time working on this thing, and it kind of worked. I mean, it was the learning experience was better than the final project submission, to be honest. But we did not, and to be honest, also first semester there was a cookie cutter CPU design that we could have started with. The professor, Dusan Petranovic from Montenegro. And that's interesting because at the time it was during there was a little bit of a disagreement about Yugoslavia, and so he came from Montenegro to hang out in America for a few years, and so he was kind of new to American teaching and whatnot. So he said, "Here's a design, you can build a CPU." So Bill and I went to Somnolon Cafe in Pomona many times and designed our own 4-bit microprocessor with microcode store, and we would toggle each micro instruction out of a ROM, and we used PALs to route control signals to different parts, and we had a unified bus, and we could add registers and ALUs and other subcomponents onto the bus, and it was pretty cool. And we got some attention, and Dusan, Professor Petranovic, appreciated our design. We got our fine grades. Everything was fine. So we were like, we're not going to do the cookie cutter, that'd be easy. And we rolled it out, and it worked, and that was fun. So the take home of all this, and this is a personal anecdote, obviously, but the take home is that it is totally fine to do the schoolwork, the homework, the extra credit, FRC, VEX, to work at the in-school restaurant. Maybe you are learning to be a dental hygienist and you work in the free clinic that they offer the public interaction with the students. These are not valuable. They're part of the learning process, and they're an essential part. And I'm obviously just picking a couple of examples out of thin air, but everything where you have any sort of apprenticeship or a transitional trial path, right? So you can learn by doing without necessarily having to be completely innovative or inventive or try to, like if everyone had to build their own robot for VEX and FRC, given the target age group and experience level, it would probably not be as satisfying. And that there's absolutely valuable experience there. There's value in that. People who are interested are given an opportunity to succeed if they want to. Whereas if you left it to chance, people who really, really wanted to succeed but didn't have quite the experience might be discouraged. If they're, hey, I spent a lot of time on this robot, and they go up against someone who had spent a little bit more time, or maybe had a parent who was into, robotic competitions of some sort. Maybe somebody at BattleBots jumped in on one team, who knows, right? So if you don't take the let's all start from the same starting point approach, then you allow for more opportunities of people who might otherwise have been excited by this to fail. And there's a time and a place for failure. And if you can enable people to become excited about innovation early by giving them that leg up, and again, it could be anything. It could be anything that involves, like engagement of brain cells, right? So cooking, medical science, biotechnology, research. When I built speakers in college, I learned all about Thiel small parameters, and I designed my own crossover. I could have purchased speakers, but instead I built my own, and what a headache that was. However, I learned a tremendous amount about how acoustics work, how audio system modeling, how RCL, if you like. And that all came in handy when we were doing our E&M labs, electromagnetism and optics, which doesn't correlate with E&M. So that was just a name we called it. So when we were doing those labs with electronics and all that, it was practical experience came in handy. So there's an opportunity for people who have a sense of innovation or inbuilt innovative bent to take advantage of that, not only from an educational and academic standpoint, but also if there are others around them similar thinking, then an innovative culture, a culture of innovation might emerge. So do we have that here? I don't know. I haven't found it yet. Do we have the innovation infrastructure? I would say mostly yes, partially yes when it comes to like there are lab spaces, there are 3D printing maker spaces, there's the Sin Shop, there are certainly co-work spaces. That's great for, let's call it hardware, software, and other. I can go to a coffee shop with a laptop, develop a software application. If I want to 3D print something, that we'll call that hardware. You need actual hardware. If I want to manufacture something, maybe that's 3D printing, or maybe there's some other process going on. I can't really go fabricate chips here, so I can send some of those things out. So there are some things I can do here. There are some things I would have to send out. If I say the other, I'm thinking about the Space Apps Challenge when I just had this conversation. Other being things like visualization or presentations that explain things, or user interface development, which is arguably software, but it's a separate, there's a human factor, right? So software development, if we say it's focused more on business logic, but the other being visualizations, audio, video, infographics, documentation, workflow, clarity, ease of use, user experience. So the ability to do some of those things here, there is a computing facility at the Switch. They have a giant supercomputer gifted from Intel Corporation, thanks to the hard work and effort of one of my colleagues, Martin Leslie. I was there when they handed over the keys. Rob Roy was adamant that it could not be water cooled, so he spent a bunch of money on that to air cool it. I don't know. I think he was successful. And so a supercomputer exists here in Southern Nevada, thanks to Martin Leslie and Intel and Professor Joe Lombardo, and so on and so forth, the various people. So there's some compute resources here locally that could be used for some compute intensive activities, right? Lately, it's more AI modeling and so on. So we can say we have some of that infrastructure. The university is almost certainly where that infrastructure will emerge. I'll get to that later. We have somewhat internet connectivity, so moving data around is okay. It's ironic since Switch is the former Enron resources. So like a ton of the internet flows through Southern Nevada through Switch. And so you would think we'd have better connection here. But I always used to say when I lived in Silicon Valley that we should have better cell coverage there. And it was horrible. So you would think, oh, Silicon Valley, you guys must have cutting edge Docomo style. Nope. There was a dead zone right near Apple when I would go to work. My phone would go essentially offline for a good half mile. I survived somehow. But yeah, just because there's one thing in a locality doesn't mean you can assume the other things. I'll probably make that point a few times more in the coming years about what we have and what we do not, or our wants versus wants. That's another episode. So the question is, we have some assets here. We have assets that could be mapped on an asset map. And I think there's some attempt to do that as part of a grant process for some federal dollars to build an innovation hub here, if that can be done. So asset map would be important, and then an idea, or at least some sort of a recipe book for how to combine them or how to mix them or make use of them. It's essentially, if you look at supply chains in the real world, And if you look at our asset map here, there are components of the asset map that might fit together as one might assemble a supply chain. So if I need one thing done over here, and then I can go to another place on the other side of town and do that, you're essentially shipping a subassembly in some state of its process. And I've done a little bit of that with manufacturing. So that's sort of what I'm thinking when I describe this. But, you have to make use of the infrastructure we have. There's a thing, a process application approach that China is well known for at this point. I'm sure other places as well, where when I worked at Leapfrog, was the first time I encountered this, was a Toy City. So entire city scale manufacturing infrastructure such that the different parts of the supply chain and different processing elements, so assembly steps and sub-assembly steps and final assembly and all that, are all within reach of each other. So you have Toy City, you have a city, cell phones. Shenzhen has a section of town where there's so many cell phone making people around that you almost trip over somebody making a cell phone when you're crossing the street, right? So if you have that infrastructure and you know how to assemble it, and whether or not it's within walking distance, or at least you can assemble a workflow through a region to accomplish some sort of, I guess, innovation early, but an implementation / manufacturing pipeline, that's helpful. So then the question is, if we do have these things, if we have a workable pipeline today, and if we have thoughts on how to build that out so that there are more components in an overall infrastructure landscape of innovation, do we become a hub of innovation? Do we become a place where companies or individuals want to relocate and execute their innovation plans? As I say so often with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, ideation, innovation, implementation, and then if we're lucky, integration. 4 eyes. No offense, glasses wearers like myself. So when I moved to Vegas in 2014, I found that there was the downtown project was fine, but I found that there was this disconnect. I was approached by one of the many startups that were around. They said, "Hey, you're from Silicon Valley. Where do we hire people?" And I said, "That is a good question." It had occurred to me, not because of this question, but I had noticed that there was a general call or an open invite to people with ideas who wanted to execute their startup notions, their aspirational dreams of creating their own company. And by the way, kudos to Downtown Project and Tony Hsieh, probably specifically, for creating that environment that was not tech heavy. There's certainly a lot of tech, Vegas Tech Fund, but you could also open restaurants or other types of businesses. So it wasn't quite as skewed in my opinion. That's something we'll try to find out more in the coming months about, where things went well, and we can, reapply with those lessons we're here. But essentially you had a lot of people, we'll call them the founders, that were coming to the downtown Vegas area to pursue that intent. And so the question was, where do we find employees? Or maybe occasionally co-founders, but yeah, where do we find employees? So having been a graduate of Harvey Mudd, as I was and still am, Harvey Mudd College has had a clinic program for a long time. I think since the 50s when they started. 55 was the first, when they opened, or first class. I think it was when they opened. I believe it was like 1 senior, 1 junior, 2 sophomores or something like that. So since 55, sometime shortly after, they created this what is essentially a sponsored senior project, right? So that was the approach we took at UNLV when I met with Zach Miles. Actually, the first time I mentioned it was with the Dean of Engineering at the time, Rama Venkat. So I described the clinic project, and he said, "I'm familiar with that. We should try that here." So the way it was implemented at UNLV in around 2015 was, or it might have been late in 2014. It was the same construct as their existing senior projects, but the project would be set by an outside third-party startup, etc. They would pay a fee to the school. They would submit a project requirements document, and a group of students would behave as a consultancy, perhaps. This is how Harvey Mudd did it. And professors would not inject their need to be published or anything. So they they would be hands-off, and the consulting team of students would engineer, in this case, a solution. And at the end, startups would have direct access to a talent pool of students. Not required, by the way. When I had my episode with Dylan Bathurst, and we talked about this a little bit, I think we talked about it during the show. He didn't want the school involved, which it wasn't like a mandatory, but it was an opportunity to reach out to a pool of talent that was interested, spend a small amount of money for a full, 9 months, 2 semesters of essentially a consulting team. So they could learn from you, you could learn from them, hopefully get some sort of output at the end. Maybe you're going to hire them. Maybe they'll just continue working on the projects when they graduate. So this formula has worked at Harvey Mudd and many other schools. At the time, I was told there were as many as 100 clinic program schools around the country. So nothing really outlandish there, nothing really overly creative even. It just makes good sense to provide another way to connect innovative startups and small businesses with talent. I'm going to use the word talent in a non-condescending but sort of generalized way. So people who are capable of being a part of what you're trying to accomplish. How about that? Talent. So I had also proposed at the time that given, when I moved here in July of 2013, so I will say that 10 years is about today as I'm recording this. Officially, the date on the lease when I first moved into a place was August 1st, but essentially 10 years ago, I could see that, there's this downtown project, a lot of people, entrepreneurial, startup bent. And I was asked by several people, hey, you're from Silicon Valley. What would it take to make Las Vegas into Silicon Valley? And they were serious. So I would always start out by saying, well, if you're in Silicon Valley, you can have things built and made. Not quite as convenient as the toy city I described. But in Silicon Valley, if you are building something electronic, you can certainly, from FCC testing to thermal testing to parts to prototyping to small-scale chip fabs. Chips and Technologies was there at the time. MicroUnity was there at the time when I was there. Intel Fab 1, I think, was still somewhat operational. So you could do things in Silicon Valley without leaving town. And that's not even getting into the talent pool, which was only growing, right? So if you wanted to accomplish ideation and innovation and then move to implementation, you could do that in Silicon Valley. By the way, why is it called Silicon Valley? Because that's where chips started. Shockley Semiconductors in Mountain View, thanks to Professor Ternan, I think it's Ternan, at Stanford, encouraging the likes of Hewlett and Packard to start their company and encouraging Shockley to move to Mountain View, encouraging government money to be spent on continuing radar, radio, and other technology projects at Stanford and nearby. So and thanks to also Lockheed and other military contractors. And so a lot of things happened in the late 40s, early 50s to construct the foundational Silicon Valley. What you see today is if you divorce yourself of the elitist, destructive tendencies, you get people that are developing software ideas. They're not really Silicon Valley anymore. They're more, I don't know, gray matter. But anyway, so that infrastructure grew, emerged out of necessity over time. When Intel formed from the Shockley departures to Fairchild and then to Intel, they grew up in a city that was still finding its way. And so they were building a lot of that. They were not doing it for immense venture capital cash injections or infusions, if you like. They wanted to make better chips and they were very competitive. And Gordon Moore and what's his name? That's Moore. No. Andy Grove. Okay, Andy Grove. I was confused them. Andy Grove, Gordon Moore, and of course Robert Noyce. These people had a maybe cutthroat, but they had a desire to dominate technology. Not necessarily counting money along the way, although I'm sure they were paying themselves and paying bills, sometimes barely. But anyway, so some of that is essential to kind of grok because you don't just sprinkle a bunch of chip fabs and workflow capacity, different processing components that are essential for hardware component and system development and manufacturing, for example. You don't just sprinkle those on top, right? They develop over time so people can actually develop workflows and build technologies on what's available so they have new technologies on what isn't. all these things. So my proposal at the time, 2015 or so, in my discussions with Zach Miles, for example, was that some sort of a starting point for this would be essential if there was any desire to be a technological anything. So I had proposed at the time the Fusion Center, first of all, because of the, radiological implications, but the Fusion Center would be a connecting of various skills, talents, and resources so that people could come to Las Vegas and interact with people here in Las Vegas to make things. And I only got a stronger sense of that in my travels when I went to places like the Center for Bits and Atoms and the Media Lab at MIT. I was in Italy, I was in France, I was in Ireland, I was in the UK, I was all around the US, watching people innovate, how they did it, what they needed to enable it. And in many cases, if you're at a hackathon and you have an idea, but there are no parts around to assemble, then you might not be able to execute that idea, right? So you can see that in microcosmic form directly and very practically in the space of a day when somebody says, oh, I would like to make this radiological sensor that will take an action if it detects a certain, well, we don't have any radiological sensors. Oh, okay. I guess I'll do something else, right? So that's just a complete random example, but you enable that ideation possibly onto implementation, but certainly during a hackathon, someone might be able to have that idea and try some innovation right there in front of you by being able to experiment with sensors and stuff. And that was essentially what we were doing while I was with Intel, was traveling around with boxes and boxes of sensors from Seed Studios and others, the Grove boards, Grove sensors, all that, and attaching them to our Arduino compatible board. So you could have the Edison ran Linux too. So you could build systems that were almost like assembling Legos to try your idea. So your idea was sitting on top of a stack of interchangeable and maybe, I'll say in quotes, easily assembled and integrated components, so that from zero to trying out your idea, maybe you can call that implementation, but certainly pre-prototype version, was actually possible. It was in the realm of possibility. And that's how you get excitement from hackathons, is you have an idea that turns into an object that you can hold in your hand, or you have something on a screen that you can show somebody. And that's where you have sparked that innovative brain cell for next time. So to me, the Fusion Center was a reasonable idea. I wrote a lot of words, somewhat readable order, cohesive perhaps. And I had suggested that industry will not just sprinkle all that stuff into the spaces between casinos here, that probably made sense to integrate with the university, especially at the time they were pursuing a commercialization of their research portfolio. So why not push that out to the Fusion Center and allow implementation, or at least integration, of that technology with this talent pool that could come from the student body. It could come from people in the population. Don't forget, we have 166,000 or so veterans. I don't know what the number was 10 years ago. A lot of veterans have a variety of useful and valuable skills. Some are separated from a military organization, some are retired, but those are talented people. So why not? And not just military, but so the point is that there are people here that are not directly connected to academia. There are people that are pursuing a degree or some other education, academia. And there are people that could come and visit here. And UNLV's proximity to the airport and our 155,000 today, I don't know what it was 10 years ago, 155,000 hotel rooms and nonstop ways of distracting yourself here, to me suggested that this could be a fine destination at the Fusion Center to combine the students, the local talent and visiting talent, and to make use of resources that may or may not exist, but that could be implemented at university scale to enable this innovation here. So that was the idea. Would you say that Tech Park is that? I would say it's not my invention, but I would say that that's not too far off. So let's say that they kind of got the idea. In fact, when the Blackfire Innovation Center was announced as a joint venture between Caesars and UNLV, I remember sending an email or something to Zach, and I said, "Oh, this sounds familiar." It wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but it's close enough. And the Fusion Center is not even a new idea, so I'm not claiming credit per se. But I think the tech park is an essential component if you are going to build an innovation anything in Southern Nevada. It's a start. It's what is it? It's necessary but not sufficient. So, but the idea I do maintain is essential is the ability to integrate local and remote talent. So now we're in modernity. It's 2023 as far as I can tell. Do companies and entrepreneurs benefit moving to Southern Nevada? I would say no. Grossly speaking, there are some cases where moving here makes sense. Anecdotally, you can find people who move here from Silicon Valley, but their company is remote. You can find here whose company is somewhere else, but they've moved here from Silicon Valley for cost of living decrease. There are people who move here because they've heard it's a big deal. There are people that move here to get into an existing job history, right? Like maybe they're maybe they came here for bartending or entertainment in general or hospitality in general, and then decide for whatever reason that they would like to start their own business. It could be a business that aligns with what they're already doing, or maybe they have an idea and they want to try out a tech startup or a manufacturing startup. There are people who might be watching cars all day in their day job and they say, hey, I can do a car customization or detailing, or, it doesn't matter. It could be anything. So entrepreneurialism knows no bounds, I would hope. So should they move to Nevada to do that? So sometimes, yeah. There are 40 million people visiting here. So a business that can take advantage of that much engagement to a cross-section of the world to expose people to new ideas and startups and new technologies or new products. Case in point, Rezo, I can't remember. There was a company here for a generator cohort. I don't even know if generator is still in business, to be honest. I know they're a national company, but in business here in Southern Nevada. They're having another cohort. But the cohort from late 2022, one of the participants was, I can't remember his name. Oh, wow. He had a tea infused with collagen and other essential components for skin, for a cosmetic application, right? You drink it, but it was for healthy skin. And so he came here from Toronto. And when I first met him, I said, oh, so you're going to go to all of the spas on the strip and hand them over a case of your product. They're going to give it to their customers. The customers are going to love it. They're going to go home. They're going to ask where they can order it, or they want to order more here. And he just went, yep. And I'm pretty sure that's what he did. And I remember before he departed at the end of the cohort time frame, he said he had issues with manufacturing that they couldn't keep up. He was selling out, and he was looking at he had a glass bottle. He was looking at a aluminum can packaging instead for efficiency of shipping. All the things you learn when you start getting popular and you realize your infrastructure is ill-equipped in Southern Nevada. Anyway, like, oh, if we actually catch on, we have no way to support that. So he discovered that early on. That's a kind of a good lesson to learn early. So he did. And I assume he's still successful. I'll have to check that out at some point. So the take home, though, he was able to make use of one of the things that Southern Nevada has that not many cities do, which is a tremendous number of visitors, right? Our total Southern Nevada population is something like, I'll say 2.5 million. I can't remember if it's 2.3, 2.6 million. The population of city of Las Vegas proper, I believe, is like 577. So let's call it something like 600,000-ish. So if you have 40 million people, and that's a number published on the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority website, so they keep it reasonably current from previous month, run rate, 40 million, give or take. But that's a tremendous number of people to see and be exposed to. And if they can run into your product at some point in some way, whether it's a collagen-infused tea for healthy skin or a product or service, technology or otherwise, that a visitor to a city like this could see or try, and this could be food, it could be drink, it could be anything, right? Then why not, right? So to me, that is a reason to operate here, certainly. Access to the convention population, the people that come here in various vertical industries. CES aligns with what I do mostly, but NAB, KBIZ, the construction show, there are all manner of activities and events that draw these people here in different verticals. So not everybody is here to play slots or to see any of the entertainers with residencies here. Some are here for particular vertical professions, and you could talk to them. So that aspect of being here is fine. But do you come here for actual innovation? That is a great question. And I am really hard pressed to answer yes to that. So that's really what I was thinking when I said no. So yeah, I would say no. Do you come here and visit? Yes. So we don't have all of the enabling infrastructure, like I've said, and the tech park will come close. You've probably seen headlines about Hollywood 2.0. So when you inject a celebrity into the mix, then it's very easy to talk about building production studio facilities and being very excited about the job opportunities, and except for a strike. But assuming the strike eventually ends, then Hollywood 2.0 will spring up out of nowhere, and suddenly this will be the next Hollywood, except that it's still going to be Las Vegas. And I continue to have a problem with this notion that we can convert one city to another, even if in name, but the belief that you can magically, by sprinkling money, completely shift a culture from its base comfort zone to something completely new like that. So Hollywood 2.0 is interesting. Would any part of LA be Las Vegas 2.0? I have said this the same thing when I've heard we're going to be the next Silicon Valley. I've heard exactly those words, and I laugh at that, shake my head, and I say, do you imagine that Silicon Valley would be the next Las Vegas? Well, of course not. You can go to Las Vegas and you can innovate, and you can also go to Silicon Valley and you can play cards, you can gamble, you can even see a show. There are any number of venues with musical performances, and there's a nice food culture there, San Francisco and even Oakland. Certainly South Bay, there's a tremendous Vietnamese community, so there's a strong Asian influence, but there's all manner of Mediterranean. So there's a tremendous food culture there. There's a tremendous culture that is not completely tech-centric, and so on and so on, right? And access to the coast, you can hang out in Santa Cruz, you can hang out in Mr. Toots coffee shop in Capitola, which was one of my go-to spots. So yeah, you can go to Silicon Valley and you don't even have to bring a laptop. So Silicon Valley has options, including gambling and entertainment, and even some sports. If you're a 49ers fan, for example, if you like the A's, who knows? You might be going to Sacramento or Vegas, who knows? But the point is, the case for becoming a new city is kind of silly, even if by name. But we don't have to be the next Silicon Valley or the next Hollywood. We could focus somewhat on being a better Las Vegas, enabling these lines of business, these innovation pathways. Totally fine. Should we lean into people visiting here to take advantage of those? Probably. Do we completely leave out the possibility of people already here working in these areas? Absolutely not. I would say it would be wonderful if people here would like to dive in head first or feet first, or however they like, into an innovation culture, whether it's tech or cooking or music or anything, and engage with visitors and outside technologies and converge here for innovation sprints or ideation, if you like. Ideation, innovation, implementation can be happening here without moving here. So do we become an innovation destination by providing some of the infrastructure, taking advantage of a lot of the infrastructure we already have, especially accommodations and some of the existing technology that's spread around here and there, a non-trivial population of people that are familiar with how nuclear weapons work, which is maybe a selling point, but certainly the nuclear medicine and the scientific angles that are part of nuclear science in general, right? So understanding how science works, there's a tremendous opportunity for mentorship or other engagements, maybe some entrepreneurialism. And there are people who don't participate in whatever culture we have now and prefer instead to pursue what they're working on. I heard this many times in the downtown project days when I would ask, as a spectator, I was working for Intel at the time, so I would visit while I was in town. I would visit downtown project people and events. And I would ask sometimes, hey, I don't see you at the downtown podcast, or I don't see you at the work in progress dinner. I don't see you at Gold Spike. I don't see you at, fill in the blank. There were many gatherings, a lot of distraction, if you will. And they would say, I'm busy trying to make my business go. So not everybody is joining in on various meetups. So our asset map may include physical structures and components that could fit into an innovation workflow. but let us never forget the people, and let us not assume that we have people we don't. So let us remember we have people, and do not assume we have too many or a lot of people that are actually interested in innovating. You cannot simply learn to code and become magically an innovator, which is, I think, a notion that some people have. You can enable a culture that encourages people to act on their innovation bent, whatever it is. And I've already, alluded to the possibility of food innovation being maybe not as grossly profitable, but certainly in every way as interesting as any other kind of innovation. So I don't know what the future innovation pathway looks like here in Southern Nevada. I do know that there's some rumbling. Certainly the university is driving, I guess I've said already, I think medical. The medical school is opening. So biotech research is fine. I'm a big fan. Business is already a strong graduation statistic. A lot of people graduate with degrees in business or economic, this or that. I was surprised that hospitality was not as high as it was. I think it's in the top 5, but it's not like hotel, restaurant management, hospitality, event planning, anything of that ilk might have been in the top 5. It might have been 4, I think. I haven't checked this in a while, but the take home, there were no tech focused majors or degree graduation program stats. Not to say that there are not students pursuing those things. There are, but UNLV is known statistically from their own numbers for business more than tech. So business is important if you're going to start a company here. So not to diminish that in any way, but I think there's this notion, as I've said, that there's going to be a Silicon Valley sprouting up here by just watering it with money. And I don't believe that will work. So I think what I'm curious to know is, what are the OKRs? What are the objectives and key results that people are imagining when they think that they are going to conjure an innovation hub here in Southern Nevada? I don't know those, so I cannot possibly comment on them, and so I will not. But my open question, if anybody has ideas on this, what are the objectives and key results? I can posit a guess based on the entrepreneurial VP, whatever the role was that LVGEA had, the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. They were hiring, and they did hire a person to oversee entrepreneurial development, ecosystem, something or other. When I saw that one of the metric targets, one of the things that the role would be responsible for improving or increasing, was on the number of exits. So startup funding, exits. So return on investment for investors for the sake of their income. How about that? So that was an objective to encourage entrepreneurship for exits. Now, unfortunately, I believe that entrepreneurship includes all the people that want to start any business, whether it's a food truck or a coffee shop or a biotech research firm, or it could be anything, right? So or emphasizing exits, I believe is short-sighted, or definitely leaves out a substantial number of potential success stories. By the way, I don't know if you know this. Everybody seems to know that 60% of marriages end in divorce, which is not true. That 80% of all restaurants fail, which is probably true, and 80% of startups also fail, which is also probably true, give or take. So just because you start a tech company and you have a bunch of venture funding doesn't mean you're going to exit, not in the way you plan anyway. And you can read stories in the headlines, in the back pages, almost every day lately. So this notion that we're going to lean into something we're completely unfamiliar with, dump a bunch of money on people. And by the way, where's that money coming from? Who knows? Federal money flowing through the GoEd, through Startup NV, getting a portion to the right people. So the objective is to elevate an entrepreneurial ecosystem, I suppose. And one of the key results is exits. And again, I don't want to comment on those. I'm totally spitballing that just based on something I read, but I don't really know. It would be really good to have them spelled out, not only the OKRs, but some idea of how to get there, other than assuming that merely building it will mean they will come. Who's they? So I think there are some missing pieces for the ecosystem that we need to have an innovation hub, or as I would rather, an innovation destination. Our education platform should be enabling entrepreneurial innovation. From what I have seen, certainly, and this is not universally true, but there does tend to be, and I've even read some presentations from people in the education field here in Southern Nevada, there has historically been a focus on workforce training, that is training employees. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. While I am a big fan of going to college, if that is what you are looking for, I do not see the, college is unnecessary case being made well. So I leave college as a completely viable option, but vocational schools as well. Like I already referred to a culinary academy, right? There's no reason to not pursue what you are interested in doing and receiving training and education that will enable you to get there. So our overall education platform for Southern Nevada, we can leave out, there are any number of tabulated results that place Nevada in general, maybe Southern Nevada specifically, in the lower part of some of the results, maybe a little bit closer to the end than most would like. But let's just say that we can take our education platform and make it better. And that's always true and should never not be true. So better education that focuses on enabling people, if they are entrepreneurial, if they have an innovative bent, things like FRC and VEX are examples for a part of a tech interest, technology. You can say STEM. I don't remember the FRC competition, while there is a component where they show their design portfolio, like their engineering notebooks, if you will. I don't know that they're computing torques. I don't know that they're programming motor controllers to have a braking window, right? How to apply the torques and when to reverse torque and how to measure. Are they really doing the electronics? I don't know. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I'm just saying that there are things that people can learn that are in the STEM field that are not necessarily a part of FRC and VEX. So component of, part of a path, part of a journey, yes. The end all and be all, not necessarily. So education, like I said, that aims to foster a culture of entrepreneurial innovation, which I think is a nice, two great tastes that go together. Two great tastes that go great together. Yeah. Peas and carrots. So entrepreneurial innovation should be an option. I know our academies, which I've called magnet schools. I don't know if they really are. I don't know if that's the correct word, but they do focus on skills. I know the Northwest Academy has culinary and automotive, and that's where one of the robot competitions I went to was held. So I know that much. I got to say, I don't hang out at high schools. So what can I say? I think we need to recognize as a culture of Southern Nevada that 21 plus is good for some things, but not for others. If you are serving alcohol in your casino, then 21 plus makes sense. Alcohol control and gaming control people would want to talk to you if that were not the case. So 21 plus is fine. However, there are way too many times here in Southern Nevada, Las Vegas, Greater Vegas, where a celebration or a launch of some sort of the Open Innovation Platform is one of my favorites. The Open Innovation Platform was having their launch party at a recently opened resort downtown called Circa, C-I-R-C-A. Circa made headlines, grand opening. One of the few 21 plus resorts, as in you cannot enter the place if you are under 21, for the Open Innovation Platform launch party. Okay. I didn't go. I made a big stink about it. I think the party got canceled, and I think Open Innovation has kind of lost the wind from its sails here. I never hear about them anymore. But the point is, there have been other situations similar. I think that's the bad way to go. I always tell people, if you have ever been to an amusement park where you must be this tall to ride this ride, so there should never be a sign that says you must be this old to be innovative or this young. We need to fuel the desire to think outside the box, to think outside the curriculum, to think outside the norm. People that want to do things differently. I know that public school systems often don't know what to do with that. I was one of those kids. They end up giving you errands to run or books to read or other distractions because they just don't have any idea. We should have some interest in and platforms for people, young people who have that desire. And we should stoke that flame, stoke that fire. If I could speak. It's been over an hour, so give me a couple points for still being able to think straight. Finally, we should be able to recognize these thought and implementation leaders of any age in a local media scheme that does something other than cover the MSG sphere, which is now the whoever owns it sphere. Who did they sell? The Venetian bought that or something? The sphere, the road being repaved for the Formula One race. Where's the stadium going to go for the A's? Whose catalytic converter got stolen? Who's throwing furniture out a window on the strip? These are the headlines that we have in order to learn who's inventing what, that we have 12 and 13-year-old entrepreneurs operating real businesses here. Never really gets attention. There are people that open coffee shops to serve an employee base that might otherwise not be able to get a job because of their special needs. There are people here who do some amazing things and they never get discovered or heard from. So innovating here is sometimes something you must do because you want to, not because you're going to receive something for it. Tangible, certainly not attention. And that can be a challenge here because attention is not necessarily what people are seeking when they do things innovative and similar. But occasionally, you do need to be recognized so that you can accomplish the next steps, so that people know what you're doing and so they can participate. One example is the 2023 International Space Apps Challenge. I am the NASA designated lead for the Las Vegas event. There are events all over the world. October 7th and 8th, hackathon. Are you interested in space? You want to work on a hackathon project with some friends for 38 hours and 59 minutes, contiguous? How do I get that word out to people so they know? It is up to me. There is very little help in the way of outreach with our normal media channels. Social media is a political mess. So how do we recognize true innovation happening here in Nevada? Good luck. LinkedIn, meh. You better know who to tag and they better be reading. And even then, LinkedIn is not great for most things. It's a platform trying to find its way out of being the next Facebook, I hope, but I doubt it. By the way, I've been a member of LinkedIn. I signed up August 11th, 2003. So my 20-year anniversary as a LinkedIn user is fast approaching. There will not be a 21, just saying. But I will say I've removed as many connections as I have, certainly maybe more. The value of LinkedIn as a way of communicating is approaching zero, as a way of just announcing things maybe, but this is not the best way to communicate the existence of true innovation in younger people, which is where the important stuff will come from. We'll need to fix that. So at the end of the day, Conjuring Innovation is a nice idea. It takes much more than having a few meetings of people who already agree with each other. And the mistaken notion that just because we have human beings doing certain things today does not mean that they will be a component or a part of, I don't want to diminish the value of humans, that they will be part of our innovation culture here. They may not want to be. You can import that culture. You can invite companies and people to move here, and you will watch the cost of living increase. You'll price people out of our existing economic strengths. As I record this podcast today, I see again, there's still 1,800 jobs available on the Strip in the hospitality industry. Did those people get priced out and have to move away during the pandemic when rents went up 25 to 40%? Who can say? Anyway, it's getting to be about that time. I'm going to chop out silences. Whenever I talk by myself, I pause here and there, and I try to truncate silence to save you on some distraction like that. So it'll be something over an hour. My throat is getting dry. My allergies are as bad as yours are. Just about wrap it up. Thank you for listening. As always, if you want to be a guest on this show, why not? I've had guests before. You can listen to some of the previous episodes. They go well. I like to ask good questions. It's not about putting you on the spot or attacking you. It's more about having a real conversation. I would really like to have a conversation about this notion that we're going to be the next Silicon Valley or an innovation hub to beat all others. I think we have a lot. We have potential, but I don't know if it's the potential that everybody thinks we have. How about that? But I also know that it's not a shake and bake Silicon Valley that you just crack open a box and throw some money in a bag and shake it a little bit. So these are the sorts of things that this channel, this whole show is about about our entrepreneurial ecosystem. Or I think I'm going to initiate an effort to refer to the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, Or should it be entrepreneurial innovator ecosystem? Not sure. Anyway, come on down. We can do, it's 100% remote, no video, have a conversation, no time limit. Anybody who says the shows are too long doesn't know that there's a pause button. Maybe you'll have to use the treadmill twice to get the whole show. Who knows? But again, thank you for listening. Don't forget to tell all of your friends, all of them, to also listen. Subscribe if you haven't already. I hate social media, so we'll try to make this better step by step. Now go out there and innovate.